hard coal. But Pete Yaksick has more on this memorial to hard coal mining.
You have the breaker boys down here. They were boys aged maybe approximately 7 to 9 years old. They worked in the breaker. They would pick the slate.
The creation of Marty Heffron of Minersville, 600 pounds of clay, a memorial to anthracite mining, the biggest in the country, we're told.
You see the oil lamp, which was roughly the original lamp that the miners used. You see the carbide lamps.
25-year-old Heffron, the son and grandson of miners, has been working 14-hour days, 7 days a week for the past 2 months, all here at Keystone College, where he's an artist in residence.
It's not a memorial just to anthracite mining, because most of the miners are dead, so the families were an important part of it.
Former miner, 82-year-old Ed Gorey.
This reminds me of my mother used to wash my back, because you come home, you're dirty. You were really dirty.
The $70,000 project will eventually be on permanent display in Forest City, thanks to the Forest City Area Rotary Club spearheading what's become a nationwide fundraising campaign. The finished product will be cast in bronze, making it a 2-ton sculpture. Behind the sculpture, we see that it is set up for easy transport, as easy as it can get. It will be divided in half, then taken to Lancaster County and cast in bronze. And after that, it will be installed along Main Street in Forest City. The official unveiling date will announce this Labor Day. At Keystone College in La Plume, Pete Yaksick, 28 Eyewitness News.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On this beautiful, beautiful day, I've been praying for at least 2 weeks so that we'd get good weather, especially today and tomorrow. The other things that we had, we were lucky. It would be raining, and then we would do something special, and it would stop raining, and then it would start raining again, so we've been very, very fortunate. I'm so happy that you could all come here. To me, this is a really, really special day. I don't want to start crying or anything, but my dad, Bill Fedock, just loved this memorial. And he would come down here and he would explain to school children or senior citizens or whoever, and he would tell the whole story about how Marty did this beautiful, beautiful memorial. And of course he couldn't do it for me on the 150th because he went to heaven on me. But let me calm down. So, about in March or early April, I said, who could possibly do this program for the 150th? And I thought, well, I'm going to start at the top. And I actually contacted Marty way back then, and I was so thrilled when he said that he would come. I was really thrilled, and I'm so happy to have you here today. Before I forget, after this program is over, we will be up at the Historical Society, and you must come if you have the time to see what Marty has up there. He came in yesterday, and he brought us some fabulous things, especially a big long, I think he says it's about 5 feet, and it's the original drawing that he had made. It's in a frame, and it's in the church there, and this is what developed from that picture. It's amazing. He's an amazing person. He's a kind, loving person, and he's so talented. I cannot imagine the talent that God gave to him. Okay. Yay. I just want to say welcome and thank you all for coming to our Coal Miners Memorial Program this afternoon. And I'd like to introduce our principal speaker, the artist and sculptor of the memorial, Martin Heffron. At the age of 24, Marty was commissioned by the Rotary Club to design what is believed to be the world's largest memorial to anthracite coal miners and their families. This panoramic cast bronze high relief tableau, 4 feet high and 17 feet wide, honors 3 generations of Forest City miners and includes an array of historically correct scenes that will be described by Mr. Heffron in his presentation. It's mounted in a stone frame designed and built by the late Edward Bognatz, who was a local masonry contractor. donations of more than $78,000 were received from around the world, and it was dedicated on Labor Day, September 3rd, 1995, in a most ceremonious program. And of course, our Rotary Club spearheaded this whole project, and there are some here today. And I'd like to recognize our councilman, Chris. I never want to pronounce your last name because it's too difficult for me. And our mayor is here, Mayor Pauline Wilcox. And Harry, I asked if Harry would say a few words before the program with Marty begins. And who else is here from the Rotarians? Okay, Rich Krisak, and this gentleman is your name? Tom Nepsadowski. Okay, and who else is here? Oh, and Joe. Okay, so thank you, Rotarians, for coming. If any of you other ones would like to say a few words before Marty starts, Harry's going to have a few words, Harry.
Peggy, could they stand up with you for a picture before he starts?
Is it working already?
The Rotarians. You're Rotarian?
Time it out.
We get a picture. Get it now before they start speaking.
There they are.
All the Rotarians.
Richard.
Want me with this one too?
Yes.
Are
Is
we
that all
ready?
that we have here?
Okay, why don't you take some?
Okay, 1, 2, 3, boom. I gotcha.
Who would ever think that the Rotary Club years ago were looking for a project? And they basically, that's part of what Rotary is about. Do what you can for the town. Then I said, well, I have a thought. And they says, what's the thought? I said, we do not have a memorial in Forest City recognizing the anthracite coal miners and their families. Behind all this, 2 of my grandfathers were killed working in the mines. One by one, the program got underway. Without the help of Mr. Kameen and others who donated contributions. I think a big check came in from California. John Kameen called me and says, Harry, we're underway. And here you are today. Our Rotarians worked hard on this, and we're so happy that y'all came to be a part of the program. That the anthracite coal mine that everybody had put together to make this a success. Even Mother Nature has been good to us. Here, Peggy, you're on.
Thank you so much, Harry. He's a darling. And for those of you that don't know it, Harry and his wife Peggy donated the beautiful 150th anniversary trees that we just planted last night at the Historical Society in memory of their parents. So thank you for that.
Peggy's going to make sure they're watered.
Frank's job.
I just want to say one thing so we can get the statistics right, because I'm an insurance guy and we all have to have statistics. There were 1,271. I have 1,271 contributors. Harry has 1,272 contributors.
Somebody, they check bounce.
But we have that. I have it in a briefcase. I just dug all this stuff out this morning. We had over 82,000. It was like $82,345 donated. So just to let you guys know.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks again now, guys. Okay, thank you so very much, because this certainly is something that our town can be so proud of. Well, here's my guy. This is the artist and sculptor of this fantastic memorial. My friend, I hope.
Yes, definitely.
Marty Heffron.
Thank you very much. This is an intimate group, so I'm going to try to keep this very personal, and if you have any questions along the way, just ask, all right? I come back to any artworks, particularly this one, and I feel like I'm visiting an old friend. It really does feel that way. It was a very emotional time to do this work, and working with Harry and the rest of the Rotary. They are to be commended. I have to thank you, definitely, and everybody in Forest City, right out from the door, for taking a chance with a 24-year-old, first of all.
24 then?
I was 24 when I started. By the time I was done, I was 25 years old. I'm going to talk about some things today that I wasn't able to say during the day of the dedication just because some people really like to talk. So I'm not going to say who, but I'm going to a little more personal information about the memorial, some of the things that went into it, and like I said, feel free, jump right in. The neatest thing that I noticed immediately coming back and looking at it is that not only this, but the people here, things age very gracefully, and your town has aged very gracefully, and the people in it. I'm sorry to hear that Joe Nadzak had passed away, and Bill Fedock. They're instrumental. Bill, particularly, he had his writings that I used as basis for a lot of the imagery that you see here, and it was through their help combined with what I can do sculpturally that we were able to pull this off. A little bit of background about me, a little bit. My father and grandfather were both coal miners. I grew up from Minersville, Pennsylvania. I was in the military for a little while, military police, a few years of service doing that, and then I was able to afford to go to college. I went to Keystone College right down the road, which incidentally is where years later I was able to sculpt this. I arranged an agreement where they allowed me to do this right in front of the students while they were having class, which was pretty unnerving at times, but it was worth it. It was worth it. It kept me on my toes, and it kept me on point, so to speak, to make sure that I was doing the very best that I can do. While I worked on it, there were days where, like the papers put out there, 14-hour days, things of that nature, which were really nothing compared to what, when I kept it in the back of my mind, what my fathers and grandfathers and your relatives went through when they worked in the mines. So that kept me generated, kept me motivated while I was working on it. So I went to Keystone College, got my associate's degree in fine art, and then I was able to get a scholarship to go to Alfred University School of Ceramic Engineering in Western New York. Did that, got my teaching certification. Lived in New York City for a little bit of time, tried to pull off the, starving artist thing in New York. That didn't work so well. And I went home and met my wife, and I ended up going home. Like most people do, they come home. And when I did, I started a family. I have 2 sons and a daughter. The day of the dedication, my daughter was here. She was 5 years old. So to put things in perspective, she is now 25 years old and has a son, so I'm a grandfather. That's fun, because you can always give them back. That's great. I'm having a ball with that. That's terrific. But and my son is 18 years old. He's going to be going to college himself next year. Actually, this year. He's leaving in a month. He's going to Westchester. He's very gifted in his own right. We all have gifts, and his is he's very athletic. He's a good baseball player. Athletic training, sports training, and pre-chiropractic. That's what he wants to do. And my youngest son, Kane Patrick, he is 17. I have Irish twins, by the way. They're only a year apart. Kane is, they're like night and day. Kane could care less for college. He tells me he wants to go into service and get his training either as a mechanic or a carpenter, and then, do something constructive. Kane, by the way, is a very good singer. He just won Schuylkill County Idol. It's a big deal back home. They do this every year. Kids try out, same as the TV program. But he sings Johnny Cash like nobody's business, and he's very good. I wish he was here. He probably belt out a few tones and keep everybody entertained. He is an entertainer. So my son Luke looks like me but acts like his mom, and my son Kane looks like his mother and acts like me, somewhat. Okay. So enough of that. Is there anybody here that is not from Forest City? Visitors from out of town, unfamiliar a little bit with the coal region. I'm gonna do something. It might be a little dry, but I'm gonna very briefly touch on coal and the background for this. First of all, anthracite coal obviously is a mineral that's been around for millions of years. Okay. Native Americans used it somewhat they knew of their properties, they could light it. And then in the early part of the 19th century, it was used by people of northeastern Pennsylvania to heat their homes and fuel the Industrial Revolution, thereby building America for the most part. So you can be proud of your ancestors that came from all of northeastern Pennsylvania. They essentially, they did. They built America. What they were doing with mining coal, and what the product was from the coal, the steel in turn, and everything else that helped to keep everything generated. I'm going to read a little bit right here, and you can take note. It might be a little dry, but bear with me. All right. Anthracite was discovered in northeastern Pennsylvania beginning in the 19th century. Since that time, many have sacrificed their lives digging and building for a better tomorrow. This poem that I found, I got it out of a book I was reading at the time when I was talking to Harry, is from Louis Polignac. It's When Coal Was King. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that book, but it's pretty apropos to this. 40 years with a pick and drill, down in the mines against my will, the coal king's slave, but now it is past. Thanks be to God, I am free at last. Miners, I know my father particularly, he had a way with words, a very direct, one-line word of wisdom sort of way of dealing with anything that would leave you thinking about it long after the fact that it was said. But there was messages in it. You could read into it and you could get something from it. Very short to the point that was on the tombstone. Primitive working conditions of the 1800s seems unbelievable when we look at the computer-driven mechanized background of today's coal industry. Hard work was a way of life for miners. In the early part of the 1900s, mining was a 2- and 3-man operation. Many hours were spent digging coal. They could, on average, a miner by himself could produce 4 to 5 tons of quartz coal. Okay. Little bits of information. Who's the guy that stats? I'm going to throw some stats out there. I have to read them because I can't remember such things. Pennsylvania Department of Mines in the 50 years. Well, let's put this in perspective. 1864 to 2014, 150 years. Of that 150 years, 75 of those years for Forest City was spent in the mining industry directly, for the most part. Okay. Of those 75 years, this report that I got for the Pennsylvania Department of Mines is a 50-year report. It said in 50 years, there were 6 million employees on the books that worked in the coal industry. 20,000 of them, there were fatalities. Miners died. 20,000 miners died in that time period. 9.5 billion tons of coal was harvested. That would mean that for the 20,000 fatalities that occurred in the mines, every 130,000 tons, somebody died. That's how that works out. Can I give you a little perspective? This was part of a letter I wrote to Harry in trying to convince him that I could do this. This was my own wording, which ultimately they came up with this, and I like this a lot better. But the coal miner was destined to a life of hard work. We can acknowledge with pride that many of our small towns and patches owe their existence to the work ethic and determination of the coal miner. Memorials are erected to commemorate our fallen war heroes of all races, colors, and creeds. It's only fitting that the hardworking, diverse individuals who form the backbone of our coal region be given this same honor. I propose to commemorate a memorial to miners and their families with an impressive structure worthy of our respect. A plaque signifying the memorial's importance should be placed on its base, and it should read, dedicated to the ethnically diverse families who built our small towns and patches, committing themselves to the mining industry and providing for a better tomorrow. I had no idea this is what we would come up with. I thought a statue would be nice, and then the more we discussed it, I realized I had a wealth of drawings that could be converted into a panel that would tell the story a lot clearer than a simple statue. All right, a lot of towns have statues and people walk right by it. They never notice it. The neat thing about this, I'm going to get into it, very famous commentary, Paul Harvey, everybody knows that? Now, the rest of the story. I don't need all this. I'm going to get to the panel. Okay, the rest of the story. We first started to kick around the idea. I had to think about what it was that was important that needed to be conveyed. So the collage-like drawings that I was working on the time, I thought that was the best way to do that. A narrative, a collage is a piecemeal of a lot of information in a small space that can tell a very, very involved story. So I started laying this out and composing it, and I had it, but I didn't have the details that made it personal to Forest City. So what you see here, starting on the left, you have actually Forest City. And the information I got at the time was from Harry's daughter. She went over on Browndale Mountain, looked back at Forest City, took a very good photograph, and then I used that photograph. And the way I did that was I laid out a whole slab of clay right on the ground, used a photograph, and I used dental tools. That's how that was sculpted. And it took about a week just to do that part of the panel and sculpted everything out. Now, while I was doing that, a few people from the churches were coming by. Like I said, I was working at Keystone College at the time, and they were coming by, and you know, they wanted to make sure that their church was seen on that panel. Some people were a little disturbed when the church was behind her head, but it's there, and I had to do that just in the way everything was laid out. There's an Orthodox cross on here. One lady pointed out, she said, you know, the slant is falling opposite of what it's supposed to be. And I said, you know what, you're right. Why is that? So I had to come back and figure that out. Well, the church faces the other way. You follow what I just said? Yep. So I left it as is. It's still that way. But I had to reassure her that it wasn't incorrect. It was just that the church was facing the other way. The women, particularly a woman that's scrubbing the coal miner's back. It's funny, yesterday I was at the Historical Society up here at the end of town all day, and people were coming in and out, and there was one gentleman, I think he's here today, he said when he was 14 years old, right up until the time he was 14 years old, he thought that his father was a black man. He didn't know otherwise. And I could relate, I laughed, because I knew what he was talking about. My dad, like, when he came home, he was covered in dirt constantly. So that's a very personal part of the story that I remember. You know, my mom actually helping and wash my dad. The image of the woman is based off of my mother. Okay, a lot of things I'm going to say today that I don't want to offend anybody, but it tells the story, and I drew on my experiences as well as the experiences of people from Forest City. It does the story good. I think it's important that everybody gets to hear it. It's based off a photo that my younger sister, took of my mom hanging clothes. She did that all the time. And I saw that picture, and I'm thinking, you know what? My mom put up with me for a lot of years. I think it's just proper that I somehow get her in there, and that is based off my mom. My mom never wore a babushka, though. I put that on there so that it's, you know, it was in line with what the turn of the century and what people were wearing at that time. The Loki, which Bill Fedock could tell you, and he has a booklet that's out that details it very well. I'm going to point the right direction. Where you at, Harry? Frank, where you at? Is that right around there? All right, Loki, there was 3 of them at one point in time that were housed right here with a 40-plus foot tall structure. The tracks ran, and in fact this whole area was part of that. And I had an old photograph that was given to me by someone that I worked on to integrate the Loki into that image to make sure that it was authentic for that time period. The breaker, apparently the breaker changed hands quite a few times back then. You had Erie Coal Company at the time, then you had Hillside, am I correct? Hillside? Hilltop? Hillside? It's a coal breaker, all right? It's the coal breaker. It's one you would see if you went through any part of northern Pennsylvania, but this one happens to be the one that was in Forest City. Okay, it is based off of the breaker that was in Forest City. As you work to the right, you see some of the coal miners. The coal miners have on their head different types of lamps. You have an oil lamp that would have been very early mining, prior to 1800s. And then a little bit after, I'm sorry, not prior to 1900. And then after 1900, they developed the carbide lamp. The oil lamp was pretty dangerous, and it didn't throw much light. If you ever seen somebody try to use one, let me back up a little bit. I had the fortunate relationship that people in Minersville still do mine, by the way. I went to high school with a few kids that still do deep mining. It's not completely dead. It's not exactly I wouldn't suggest it to anybody, but it's not completely dead. My friends, when I was telling them about what I was working on, I would spend a few days in the mines with them working, just to get a perspective as to what's going on. And they tried to show me what it would be like to work with just an oil lamp in the mine. And you see shadows, and you see images, and you see ghost images. I could tell you why some of the miners were very spiritual, because you better be when you're in that situation in the pitch dark. Yeah, you're busy, and you're staying busy, and you're working all day long, but you have more than just your sheer will to work to keep you motivated and generated. So the oil lamp was a very important part to tell what time period that we're talking about. Then we get into carbide lamp. Primarily in this area of the world, that's what was used. Okay, everybody used a carbide lamp. It was a little safer. People were able to get a little more light out of it. So that's why you see that there. And then there's different types of hats. And I'm inviting you all up to the Historical Society after I'm done, because all this, the authentic versions of everything that you see here depicted, are in the Historical Society. This type of hat, carboiled hat, the canvas style hat. Okay. On top of the canvas hat, you have the carbide lamp. On this gentleman here, the miner, you have an electric lamp. This would be right up to this day and age. This is the type of lamp that they use. In fact, this is what my buddy was using. He used it with the battery pack. He said it's a lot safer. You didn't have to worry about it spilling anything on you or burning you or anything of that nature. After I did Forest City, I was able to go to the Q Creek mine disaster site. Remember that? They made a Disney movie about it. There were 9 miners trapped in the ground out in western part of Pennsylvania. Got a tour of it, and it was amazing that, yeah, they told the story and they told you everything that happened. You have to hear that story. If nobody's ever seen it, rent the movie and watch. A series of circumstances seem to just occur in the right fashion. There's exceptional human experiences that we all have that stand out in your life. Near-death experience has to be one of them. If anybody has ever had one, particularly these miners they had it in group. All right, I could look to this project and say this is probably one of the exceptional human experiences that I've ever had. I was fortunate to be able to take all that energy, that ball of energy, and put it somewhere, because if I didn't, I think my dad was going to kill me. At the time, I just got home from the military, and I was just starting to go to college. And you know, I don't know about most of y'all, but most parents want their kids out of the house by the time they're 18. They won't say it, but they kind of want you to move on and do your own thing. So that's where we were with that. The Breaker Boys. You have the Breaker Boys. They would have been anywhere. I know my grandfather told me he was 7 years old when he started working as a slate picker. Breaker Boys, slate pickers, interchangeable name. And the only reason he was able to do that is he faked his birth certificate and told me he was 12. That's yeah, pretty amazing. So he started as a slate picker. They did exactly what I just said. It would come through the breaker. They start it. That was your first job. They would pick out all the debris, whatever it might be, slate, rock, wood, whatever it was, trying to clean out the coal, all right, in a filter-like fashion. As you got older, you might have gotten a job inside the mine. There's a lot of jobs in the mine that are not depicted here. And you can ask your relatives, they'll tell you, hey, I was an electrician, or I was a pump operator, or what I did was highlight the ones that told the story in the most direct manner. I don't mean to not pay homage to any one particular job. I know there was a lot of them, but I had to filter to a point, and the best way to do that was to pick those jobs that seemed to tell the story most directly. And that's what I went in progression from what you would have done as a young child working in early mines and worked your way up. So if you were, say, 12 to 15, 16 years old, you would have possibly gotten a job as a mule driver, taking care of walking the mule out of the mine, all right? That was your job. Very dangerous job, especially if the door boy, anybody know what a door boy is? Okay, door boy was simply that. That's your job. Make sure that door is open. It controlled the draft in the mines, and you'd hear the bell. If you don't open that door, usually I fell asleep, unfortunately. Mule come crashing through the door, and a lot of times the mule door boys would get killed. That's a big heavy door that's swinging in the mines. All right. You worked your way up, you'd work as a spragger, doing odd jobs, maybe apprenticeship coal miner, and with God's grace, if you lived long enough, you were considered a coal miner. Okay. The whole panel makes use of exaggerated use of perspective. Areas, as you can see from where you're standing, areas are emphasized or they stand out more, and some areas are de-emphasized. Not that one's more important than another, but I realize people are going to look at this. If I made everything all flat, this would be very confusing to the eye, and it would not convey the story appropriately. So areas are highlighted or emphasized, they stand out more in a high relief. High relief was chosen because it's somewhere between a middle ground between actual painting and actual sculpture like you would see in a statue. Statue, you can walk completely around it. Painting, you get the illusion of depth on a flat surface. On a high relief sculpture, you get both. You can literally kind of look this way, walk around, look that way to a point, and you still get that dimensional quality, almost like a high relief coin. You can see the dimension that's going on in there. I told Peggy that I would never tell who I used as the faces. These faces are people from Forest City. I took a day or two and I walked through Forest City while I was sculpting it, and I just simply snapped photos. I didn't say, whose face I would use. I told them what I was doing, but I had a pile of people's faces. And what I was looking for was people that had very distinct features, that this Slavic background, anything that looked very ethnic. And I know every ethnic background has contributed to it, but it was my judgment. I looked at those faces and I thought, this guy has good character, or this woman, her face, has good character. I'm going to use that to tell this story. I'm going to tell you one person, Peggy, who it is, and
I think I guessed one yesterday.
no, you'll never guess. I'm going to tell everybody. One person, and when you get a chance, go up to the Historical Society. I have a casting of the individual, a full casting in around. It's my dad. I used his face on this miner right here, smaller miner up here. So after you worked your way through the whole mine, and if you lived long enough and you became a coal miner, you can see he has a Davy lamp, he has his lunchbox. He would have been testing early in the morning. He would have crawled up into the face of a mine and made sure that there was no dangerous gases, methane or black damp or anything like that, and so the rest of the workers could come in. The miner was in charge of taking care of everybody that worked underneath him, making sure they got paid, making sure they had the material, and then in turn, your company, you had to pay your rent. And by the time you're done, you had basically nothing left. And we know the story, but I'll just add to that. There are 21, we were counting them right before, there's 21 faces that are on this panel. And the 21 faces represent roughly the 21,000 people who worked in the mines over the course of all that time that I told you that they have records of. There's more. I'm sure there's got to be more fatalities and very dangerous injuries, but that was what was used to determine how many faces that I wanted to put in the panel. That's it on the personal part of the details with the panel itself. The clothing and the mule. The mule was difficult. I started sculpting the mule, and the lady who was a janitor in Keystone College said, "What are you doing with the horse on your panel?" I said, "No, that's a mule." She goes, "No, sir, that is not. That's a horse." I said, all right, I better do something about that. If you could figure that out, I better change that. She said, I have a farm. Why don't you come home with me? And I have mules. You could take a look. That's a good idea. I think I'll do that. So that's what I did. I went home with her, did sketches of the mule to make sure nobody would ever come up here and say, "Nice horse." So the difference was the ears. The ears are a lot longer, and the snout's slightly different. Okay. Other details about the panel. Tidbits of information. When I first started, it was 300 blocks of clay laid up on this. 302-pound blocks of clay, 600 pounds. 600 pounds of clay laid out on a panel, and it was smooth flat. And the process that I went through was that I drew what I have in a drawing up at the Historical Society. I drew it right on the clay. I already had a plan of action, and I drew it out. And then once it was drawn out, I just started adding clay where it felt appropriate and pushing it deeper where it felt appropriate. There's an intuitive sense to it that I had, that I trusted. Now, once I had all these chunks and blobs, and it still didn't look like much of anything else, now the details. So as I start working the details, that's when I could tell you that part of this I don't remember doing. There's a shift that occurs, and anybody can relate to this when you get involved. It's called being in the flow, getting in the zone if you play sports. You could call it meditation. You could call it whatever you want. You do it when you drive. You go from point A to point B and never realize how you got from point A to point B. Well, I was doing that. I was in the zone, so to speak. So somebody said, how did you do that? And I said, I don't know. I know I did it. I was there, but there were days and moments that honestly, I can't tell you that I stopped and said, holy hell, look what I'm working on. I did do that sometimes, but there were days that everything just kind of went and it occurred. Some things I struggled with, some things I didn't. The way I worked with that is I would sleep on it. The mule did not look like a mule, so I did the sketches and I would sleep on it. I would digest the information, do the sketches, and allow it to sink in, allow it to incubate, so to speak, and then just do what I knew I could do best. I was always told by my dad, if you put your mind to it, you can do anything. And he was a firm believer in that. And he's proved it to me many times. So I thought there's no reason why I can't do this. I could do this. I could figure this out. I better do this. Harry's going to be pissed. So, so I had Harry pushing behind me too as well. Aside from that, I've learned a lot from the time I first did this to now. Some of the things that I've learned is that you're not who you think you are. You're a bit of everybody you've ever met. And for that, I'm glad that I've met everyone. I know not as personal, but some people I have. I've met them very personally. And I think in my heart that I did the best job that I can do, and there is no other memorial like this that anybody has in the world. And it's going to stand. This will stand long after all of us are gone, and I hope somebody eventually is standing up here that has enough will and desire to tell a story about what it meant to live in northeastern Pennsylvania.
Marty, did we call him Big Mike?
Yeah, we called the miner Big Mike. We just made that name. Harry made that name up. I didn't make it. Harry made the name up. I thought it was good. I was like, yeah, it's Mike. I didn't want to tell anything who it was. I said, yeah, so Mike sounds good. I like that name.
Marty, is there somebody hiding up in there that?
Yes, there is. I got. Yeah, who did I share that with? Peggy, no. Pudge.
What?
Yes, Pudge. I shared that with Pudge earlier.
You said it was a secret.
It's a secret. Should I tell him or no?
It's up to you. Yes, tell us.
Okay. Lee Ruck was a miner that I knew who he gave tours in the Lackawanna coal mine. I don't know if anybody's ever gone down there. It's very dressed up, very clean. It's not exactly what a real coal mine. It gives you a good feel, but a real coal mine, you're probably up to your knees sometimes in muck and dirt and very dirty. You're doing a lot of crawling and things of that nature. But Lee Ruck, I got talking to him. He's giving me a tour and telling what I'm working on, trying to gather information. And Lee tells me, he says, where are you from? I said, Minersville. He goes, no shit. He goes, I'm from Newtown. Newtown is only a mile away from Minersville. I said, hey, it's a small world, right? He goes, yeah. He goes, hey, you know those miners that were buried that time? Latimer, somewhere up in there? He goes, they were here. One of them was here. And you won't see this on the Discovery Channel special, but he talks about these visions of angels and life-changing visions that he had while he was down in the mine. I said, do you believe any of that, Lee? And he goes, I don't know. He goes, I don't know what to believe anymore. He goes, why should I change it? Because what was more important about any of that was how they changed thereafter. So whether or not you believe in angels or whether or not believe in ghosts does not really matter. The point is, whoever does, it seems like their life has changed thereafter, more often than not for the good. So why knock it? Well, part of the stories behind that, older miners that I talked to at home, they would tell stories about Tommy knockers. Anybody know these stories? Anybody hear anything about Tommy knockers? bangs and creaks and different noises that miners would hear in the mines. Sometimes it might have been their mind playing tricks on them, but anyway, they thought it was the spirits of the mines. Okay, so there is a face that I have buried right up under the Loki that represents the Tommyknocker, the spirit of the coal mine. All right, you're welcome to kind of look up under there if you want to find it. But other than that, anybody have any questions? Anything particular? Yes. The door boy? With the mule driver? Yeah, I think I was working through the progression of what they did as they. Yeah, while they were coming through the tunnel. By the way, this was taken from a photo, I think, from the number 2 shaft that would be behind Frank and Peggy Brager, right? Am I correct? Number 2? Right. It was a deep shaft mine, but once you get down, straight down a deep shaft mine, they branch out. There's tunnels that branch out. And when they do, the tunnels to direct some of the airflow so the miners could breathe are partitioned off either by canvases or doors. And the door boy would have been someone who, if there was if the tunnel kept on going, there would have been a door here, closing it off. And whenever they were coming through, they would sound a bell, and the door boy would open up the door, allow them to continue on their way. But if the door boy fell asleep, because he was a young boy, he got bored, he got tired, whatever, you know, like most kids nowadays, same thing, that door would swing open because the mule plowed into it, and the door would swing and often killed them. Because it was a heavy door, it wasn't a light door. Yes?
From start to finish, how long did it take you?
Good question. That's hard to answer in one sentence because the designs and the preparation for this took probably 2 years by the time I got talking to Harry. At that point, it was a matter of modifying it to make it personal to Forest City. But the actual sculpting of it, once I got to Keystone, I sculpted this whole thing within 2 months. So I was, I was on it. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, there's over, I think there's 10 churches total. And I talked to Peggy about this. She said a good bit of churches are not there anymore. They've been destroyed, they've been knocked down, or converted, which is good. I'm seeing that with a lot of projects that I've done at different towns. Churches are closing up. And they're left with these big structures, aside from taking all the religious artifacts out of them and, redistribute them to the diocese. Now you have this big building, and I've seen them convert it to everything from youth centers to dance halls to old folks entertainment center. Historical Society is the first. I didn't see that one. I'm sure that's a great idea, Peggy. That's a terrific idea. But all the churches that are up here. I think there's 2 that I was told that are still operational. Yep. It's unfortunate, but that's, I guess progress. I don't know if you want to call it that, but it's change. How's that? It's change. Yeah. Yes?
Did you put a canary in the
No, I used the Davy lamp. And the reason I did that was the canary connotated a much earlier time than Forest City, and I could have, and I still would have been okay, but I thought this would, anybody who knew of the early mining in Forest City would probably remember this a lot more than they would the canary and the coal. I do have sketches with it in. We opted not to do that, put that in there. Yes? What's that? Davy. It's a Davy, yeah. It's not a baby lamp, it's a Davy lamp, yes. Yes? What's that? The whole thing is a surprise.
My father was killed in a coal mine when he was 32 years old.
Yes.
I was 8 years old. There was no compensation.
No.
If it wasn't for my grandparents, they raised us.
Yeah.
There was no compensation. Bring your folks down. The family took care of him.
Yeah, it was pretty.
He was killed in a Clinton van.
Some of the stories of the miners, as he told me, older miners, they said it was a pretty unfeeling affair. First of all, it took a long time before any families knew who had passed away in a mine. And when they did, they usually found out by having their husband or son dropped off at the doorstep from the Black Maria, they called it Black Maria, and then it was up to the mother or the wife to take care of business. And that was it. That's all you got.
I remember they used to blow the whistle if somebody got hurt.
They blow the whistle, right? They let you know, but it was a long time coming before they would figure out exactly, depending on what was going on, whatever the situation was. I'm back on you. What is the surprise? Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Yes. Somebody else asked me yesterday. He said, hey, how come there's no rats or mice in your mine? I said, well, you're not looking hard enough. There are rats in this mine. I'll point it out to you. At one point in time, I wasn't pointing any of it out. I said, let people find it out for themselves. But right here, he's in broad daylight. He's sitting right there. The importance of the rat is, or the mouse, or the creatures that were in the mine. The miners never killed them. What they did was they fed them. They paid attention to them, because what would happen is if they ran, they followed them, because they were super sensitive to what was going on. If the earth started moving and you weren't able to sense that, they were. So yeah, you learn to pay attention to God's creatures, whether or not it's a rat. No, she had asked me about the canaries. No canaries. Is there any other questions? Anything?
Marty, I think,
yes.
You know, people have laid all these bricks in, and the railroad track coming up, come around to see
yes.
every part of this design.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot more. Like I said, you're much more than what you think you are. You're right. There's more going on. I can't claim to take credit for the memorial itself. I'm just one part of the big cog. And when this cog goes, there's somebody else going to be filling it. And I hope that they do it in a proper fashion. Yes? Right here? Okay, this is part of the composition to balance off what's going on for how high relief. Originally, this drawing was drawn flip-flopped. The mule and the mule driver were over here. The woman washing was over here. Now, what you had to realize is people coming mainly to visit Forest City are coming down this road. And if they glanced to the left, the first thing that they were going to see was essentially a flat panel and two figures. This has a much more dramatic impact when you're coming from that direction. So I flipped the whole composition completely around, had this high relief. Now that this is very high relief, upwards of 10 to 12 inches off the flat surface, I needed to do something over here, because once your eye catches over there, you're going to start reading this back. And when you do, if it looks dull and boring, you're going to keep on going and not find any interest to pull the car over and come up here and take a look at it. So these are the timbers that would have been in the mine, continued from the mine over here. And they just are chopped off almost in dreamlike fashion, and then the composition, like a collage would be, it just picks up the rest of it. So there's some artistic license I took. It's not literal as if you saw that way, but it helps visually to balance the whole thing off. That's why I did that.
I thought it might have depicted the mine caves, David's. Because could they...
That's not what I had intended, but I like that.
I didn't know, it was shored up by timber.
Yes, yes.
And they crashed, and then you have mine caves.
Yes, yep.
So that's my interpretation.
That's great. Part of the narrative is you get to fill in some of the blanks, and you did. You did very well. I like that. Yes.
Can you repeat what she said?
She said it gave her the impression that the timbers had cracked and that they're on their way down.
Yeah,
and
that's
yeah,
what I
that's a neat thing about art. This is a piece of art, by the way. I know it tells the story, but it is a piece of art. It is subject to some interpretation as to, you know, the person looking at it. Especially if you have any strong connection to the mining industry. You're going to see this differently than a visitor from New York who knew nothing about the mining industry whatsoever. Any other questions? Any comments? Anything? All right. Thank you. Yes.
I want to say, you know what, I don't remember why. I only remember that my dad kept his metal lunchbox.
Yes.
Because he said they were round, like a little round thing before. And the reason they were metal is because the mice, they could, you know, they ate their lunch in the mine.
Right.
Once they went in, they didn't come out.
Right.
But I remember that metal lunchbox that he kept for years.
Thank you. Well, after we're done here, I'm going to be up at the Historical Society. I welcome you all up there. There's a lot more artwork that I have, a lot more drawings. Come up and ring the bell, right, Peggy? Okay.
And pick up my flyers.
Pick up a flyer as well. If anybody wants anything signed, I have a bunch of flyers up there. I have no problem with that. And if you need to ask any other things, I'll be up there. Thank you very much.
Look, wait, I just want to give him a little presentation before we go. I can't thank you enough. That was so fascinating. Fascinating. Okay, Frank wants to say something as former mayor, because he was the mayor at the time of your putting this here. He was mayor for 16 years, and we also have Mayor Pauline Wilcox over there, that she showed up today. Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming. I just have a few little mementos for you. Okay, first we're going to start off with something that you can take home for your son. I believe you said he's very interested in history, and I'd like you to give him that on behalf of the Forest City Area Historical Society. We have the anniversary issue of the Forest City News, and inside there's going to be a whole lot of things about you and other things that were going on. And then Marty admired some of the things that were up at the Historical Society, because he was there all afternoon yesterday. So I brought you a little bunch of things. You've got the poster of your Coal Miners Memorial Program. You've got all kinds of things. One of the things he loved, and if you do come up there in the coal mining area display, there is a thing called a Miner's Prayer, and he liked that. So I hustled up and I made you a copy of that. There's a whole bunch of things like that. Then he's going to get one of course, our Historical Society badges that we are selling up at the Historical Society for $2. And he's going to get a wooden nickel. And then he's going to get one of a kind that nobody else has at this time, is the Coal Mining Memorial button for you. How about that? I made you that like about 10 minutes ago. Okay, there you go. So thanks a million. Wasn't that marvelous, everyone? That was marvelous. Thank you.
John, get in there. We're done. If I can get a picture of it. Just put it behind you.
Former mayor, current mayor, and the big boss right there.
I'd like to thank Marty for coming. Did a beautiful job. And I have a little story for you.
Put her closer.
My dad was a miner for 30 years, and I always felt lucky. You know why? Because I was the youngest person in the family. Every Saturday you took a bath. Guess who was the first one in the tub? I was the first one in the tub. My dad, when he got out, we could have planted flowers in there. Thank you for coming.
I hope everybody can come up there now. We also have the Authors Day going on after.
Let me get another one. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
I don't have this one. Who is this one? Oh, no kidding. I gotta have that one.
That one they went, that made a movie out of.
Back in 1200, right, when they were.
They made a movie.
Good point to the book.
Nobody else did. Somebody. This glacier came
What are you doing?